She had no idea the woman she humiliated over a forgotten credit card would, in exactly 11 minutes, bring the full weight of a nation's power crashing through the front doors of that grocery store. Sirens, soldiers, and a son who called her mother in front of everyone. By then, it would already be too late to take back a single word. The clock above the sliding doors read 12:34 when Agnes Whitfield stepped into Corner Fresh Grocery, her canvas tote bag slung over one shoulder and a folded list tucked into her coat pocket. She moved the way she always did, unhurried, unnoticed, a small woman in a gray cardigan who could have been anyone's grandmother, because that was exactly what she wanted to be. Nobody in that store had the faintest idea that the address printed on her identification card, if anyone had bothered to look closely, would have made their knees buckle. Agnes was the mother of President Elias Whitfield. She could have arrived in an armored convoy. She could have sent an aide to do her shopping, or had the entire store closed off for a private hour, the way her security detail begged her to allow at least once a month. She refused every time. "I raised that boy in a kitchen where we counted coins," she'd tell them, waving off the suggestion with the same stubborn flick of her wrist she'd used since 1974. "I'll die before I let a title change how I buy milk." So she'd made a deal with her son's security chief, a weary, silver-templed man named Foster, who had long since accepted that arguing with Agnes Whitfield was a battle no one won. One plainclothes agent, positioned outside, invisible, watching from a parked sedan across the street. No earpieces, no visible detail, just a woman named Agnes, doing what women like her had always done, filling a cart with the small, ordinary things that kept a family fed. Today the list was short: milk, eggs, a loaf of bread, the soft kind her grandchildren liked, a bag of apples, some pasta, a jar of sauce, a few chocolate bars she wasn't supposed to be buying for them but bought anyway, because grandmothers everywhere have always broken that rule and always will. She wound through the narrow aisles slowly, humming under her breath, pausing here and there to compare prices out of a habit older than the presidency itself, older than her son, older than the version of herself the world thought it knew. To the store around her, she was simply an old woman taking her time, and that was precisely how she liked it. By the time she reached the checkout line, the store had begun to fill with the after-lunch rush, office workers ducking in for quick items, a mother with 2 exhausted children hanging off her cart. And near the back of the line, a woman in a faded blue coat, thin from more than just her frame, holding a small basket close to her chest, as though it might be taken from her. Her name was Marissa Combs, though nobody in that line would learn it until much later, when the story of that afternoon would be told and retold, in newspapers and kitchens and long into the years that followed. Marissa had exactly $42 to her name. It sat folded in the front pocket of her coat, counted 3 times before she left her apartment, because counting it a 3rd time somehow made it feel like more than it was. In her basket, a carton of milk, a small bag of rice, a jar of peanut butter, and a box of the cereal her 6-year-old daughter, Nora, had been begging for since her last birthday. Marissa had promised her, just this once, she'd promised, even though the promise would eat through nearly everything she had left until her next paycheck, 4 days away. She kept her eyes on the basket, not the people around her, not the register, not anything but the math running behind her eyes. At the front of the line, Agnes set her items on the belt one by one, her weathered hands moving with the unhurried patience of someone who had never needed to rush for anyone. The cashier's name tag read Taylor, 25 years old, sharp-eyed, quick with her hands and quicker with her tongue. Taylor had worked the register at Corner Fresh for 3 years and had developed, in that time, a particular contempt for anything that slowed her line down. She scanned Agnes's items with brisk efficiency, barely glancing up, rattling off the total the moment the last item beeped. "That'll be 31.18. Agnes reached into her purse, a small, worn leather thing, older than Taylor herself, and began patting through its contents. Her fingers searched one pocket, then another, the practiced motion of someone who knew exactly where things were supposed to be, and was beginning, with the first flicker of alarm, to understand that this particular thing was not. "Oh!" Agnes murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. "Oh, dear!" "Ma'am?" Taylor's voice carried the flat impatience of someone who had already decided this transaction was becoming a problem. "I seem to have left my card at home," Agnes said, offering a small, apologetic smile, the kind she'd given 1,000 times to 1,000 strangers over a long, ordinary life. "I'm terribly sorry. Would you mind holding these for just a moment while We don't hold items." Taylor's tone sharpened instantly, cutting through the old woman's sentence like scissors through paper. "You can't just come in here and act like this is a charity. Some of us have a line to move." Agnes blinked, startled by the sudden heat in the girl's voice. "I understand. I only meant, broke people always got some story," Taylor said, louder now, loud enough that heads throughout the front of the store began to turn. "Y'all come up in here dressed all humble, and can't even pay for a few groceries. This ain't that kind of store, ma'am. Broke people don't get to hold up the whole line." A ripple of amused, cruel energy moved through the small crowd gathering behind Agnes. A woman 2 spots back, arms crossed over an expensive-looking coat, let out a short, ugly laugh. "Oh my God, finally somebody said it. Ma'am, can you step aside? Some of us actually want to pay and leave." A man further back, impatient and red-faced from the heat outside, added his voice to the pile. "There's no place for old heads holding up lines like this. Figure your money out before you come to the register. Move it along." Agnes said nothing. She had faced far worse in her long life. Poverty, grief, the terror of watching her son campaign under threats no mother should have to carry. But there was something about being humiliated in public, over something as small as a forgotten card, that struck a nerve she hadn't expected. Her cheeks flushed. Her hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly against the strap of her purse. She began, quietly, to step back from the register, already reaching to set her chin high, the way she'd taught herself to do decades ago, whenever the world tried to make her small. That was when Marissa Combs stepped out of line. She didn't think about it. That was the strange thing she'd tell people later, when they asked how she found the courage. There had been no deliberation, no internal debate weighing her own empty pocket against a stranger's need. She simply saw an old woman being torn apart in public over $31, and something in her chest refused to let it continue. "I'll pay for it," Marissa said, setting her basket down on the little shelf beside the register. Taylor blinked at her. "What?" "Her groceries. I'll cover it." Marissa was already pulling the folded bills from her coat pocket, her fingers steadier than her voice. "Ring her up, please." The woman in the expensive coat scoffed. "Are you serious right now?" Marissa didn't look at her. She kept her eyes on Taylor, on the register, on the number that would take almost everything she had left in the world. 31.18, right? Taylor, caught somewhere between confusion and the tiniest thread of shame she wasn't yet willing to acknowledge, rang it through without another word. Marissa counted out the bills with care, the same care she'd used counting them that morning in her kitchen. Only this time, each one felt heavier leaving her hand than it had going in. When it was done, she had $11 left. Not enough for the milk, Not enough for the cereal Nora had been promised. Not enough, really, for anything at all. Agnes turned to her, eyes bright with something that had nothing to do with the money, and everything to do with the astonishment of being seen, truly seen, by a stranger who owed her nothing. "Oh, sweetheart, you didn't have to do that. Thank you. Thank you so much." "It's okay," Marissa said, and meant it, even as her stomach tightened at the thought of the empty cabinet waiting at home. Agnes reached out and took her hand, holding it a moment longer than strangers usually do. "I tried to explain. I really did try. I just forgot my card. That's all. I wasn't trying to cause any trouble." "I know," Marissa said gently. "I saw some people just don't have patience for anybody these days." Agnes gave her hand one more grateful squeeze before letting go, and Marissa turned back toward her own abandoned basket, now sitting forgotten on the little shelf. She looked at it for a long moment. The milk, the rice, the peanut butter. The cereal box with the cartoon rabbit on the front that Nora loved so much she'd drawn it, badly, in purple crayon, and taped it to their refrigerator door. Marissa picked the items up one by one and carried them back to the shelves, returning each to its place with the quiet, practiced motion of someone used to putting things back. The cereal was last. She held it a moment longer than the rest before setting it gently on the shelf, whispering an apology to no one, to Nora, to herself. Then she walked toward the exit, empty-handed, $11 lighter in spirit than in her pocket, telling herself she'd figure something out. She always did. She was 3 steps from the sliding doors when a voice called out behind her. "Wait!" Marissa turned. Agnes was standing near the checkout, purse clutched to her chest, watching her with an expression that had shifted from gratitude into something sharper, more searching. "You paid my bill," Agnes said, walking toward her now. "But what about yours? How are you going to feed yourself? Your children?" Marissa managed a small, tired smile. "It's fine, honestly. That was my last bit of cash. But it's okay. I'll manage with what's left in the fridge. I've done it before." She glanced toward the doors, eager to escape the conversation before it cracked the composure she was barely holding together. "You have a good day, ma'am." "Wait," Agnes said again, and this time her voice carried a different kind of weight. Quiet, certain, unmistakably a woman used to being obeyed, though Marissa had no way of knowing that yet. Agnes reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. She dialed a number she rarely used in public, one saved simply as E. It rang twice. "Mom?" The voice on the other end was warm, immediately alert. "Is everything all right?" "I need you to come to Corner Fresh Grocery," Agnes said, her eyes never leaving Marissa's face. "Right now, Elias. It's important." There was a pause on the line, the particular silence of a man recalculating an entire afternoon in the span of a single breath. "I'm on my way, Mother," the President of the United States said. "Don't move." Behind the register, Taylor had gone very still, her hand frozen mid-scan on the next customer's items, the name Elias ringing some distant bell she couldn't yet place. She had no idea that bell was about to become a siren. The first sign was the sound. It began as a low hum, somewhere beyond the parking lot, faint enough that most people in Corner Fresh Grocery didn't register it at all. Within 90 seconds, that hum had become a rumble, and within 2 minutes, the rumble had become an unmistakable procession of engines, sharp and disciplined, rolling down the street in a formation no ordinary visitor ever arrived in. Marissa heard it first. She turned toward the wide front windows, frowning, uncertain what she was looking at. Black SUVs, 4 of them, then 6, sliding into position along the curb with a precision that belonged to a world she had never once imagined touching. Men in dark suits spilled from the vehicles before they'd even fully stopped, fanning out along the sidewalk, speaking into their sleeves, scanning windows and rooftops with the calm, practiced urgency of people trained to expect danger in ordinary places. Inside the store, the ordinary hum of a Tuesday afternoon died all at once. The woman in the expensive coat, who had laughed at Agnes minutes earlier, froze mid-sentence, her phone slipping slightly in her hand. The man who'd told Agnes there was no place in line for old heads took an instinctive step backward, some primal part of him already sensing that whatever was about to happen, he did not want to be standing where he currently stood. Taylor, still frozen behind the register, watched through the glass as two more vehicles pulled up, sleek, armored, flanked by motorcycles, and understood, in the pit of her stomach, before her mind had even caught up, that something in her world was about to break open and never close the same way again. Then the doors slid apart. Foster entered first, sweeping the store with a single practiced glance before stepping aside. Two more agents flanked the entrance, and then, moving through the parted crowd with the unhurried, deliberate calm of a man who had learned long ago that panic was a luxury he wasn't permitted, came President Elias Whitfield. He wore no crown, no obvious symbol of the office he held, just a simple dark coat, his tie loosened from whatever meeting he'd abandoned mid-sentence to get here, but there was no mistaking him. His face had been on every screen, every headline, every debate stage for the better part of a decade. The store, which seconds ago had been filled with ordinary chatter, fell into a silence so complete that the soft hiss of the refrigerated aisles became audible. Elias didn't look at the agents. He didn't look at the stunned cashier, or the woman in the expensive coat now visibly trying to fold herself into invisibility, or the dozen strangers holding their breath around him. He looked only at his mother. Mother? His voice, so composed on every podium the country had ever watched him stand behind, cracked slightly with something rawer, more private. "What are you doing here all by yourself?" Agnes reached up and patted his cheek, the way she had done since he was small enough to be lifted onto a kitchen counter, entirely unbothered by the small army now surrounding them. "I was buying groceries, Elias, the way I do every week. You know that. You scared 10 years off Foster's life," Elias said, glancing briefly at his security chief, who exhaled for what looked like the first time in several minutes. "What happened? You said it was important." Agnes turned, her eyes finding Taylor behind the register. It was in that moment, that single, unbearable moment, that Taylor understood exactly who the old woman in the gray cardigan had been. Not a burden, not a broke lady with no place in a checkout line. The mother of the President of the United States, standing in her store, having been humiliated by her in front of strangers over $31.18. The blood drained from Taylor's face so completely that Foster took an instinctive half-step toward her, as if she might faint on the spot. "I forgot my card," Agnes said simply, her voice carrying easily through the silent store. "I tried to explain. This young lady decided that meant I didn't belong here. She told me broke people have no space in this country. Told me they shouldn't be around rich people." Agnes's gaze didn't waver from Taylor's face, not cruel, but unflinching. Other folks in line agreed with her, laughed at me, told me to get out of the way. Elias's jaw tightened, the shift so small most people wouldn't have caught it, but Taylor did. So did the woman in the expensive coat, who suddenly found the floor tiles extremely interesting. "And then," Agnes continued, turning now, searching the small crowd until she found the face she was looking for. This young woman stepped out of line and paid for everything, using every dollar she had left. Money she needed for her own daughter. Agnes held out a hand toward Marissa, who stood near the doors, frozen between the urge to disappear and the strange gravity of the moment holding her in place. She gave up her groceries, put them all back on the shelf, was walking out of here with nothing, and wasn't going to say a word about it. Elias looked at Marissa properly for the first time. Really looked, the way a man does when he's trying to understand what kind of person exists in front of him, and something in his expression softened. "What's your name?" he asked. "Marissa," she managed. "Marissa Combs, sir. Mr. President." The title felt absurd leaving her mouth, aimed at a man standing in a grocery store beside his mother, but there was no other way to say it. "Marissa," Elias repeated, as though committing it permanently to memory. "You didn't know who she was?" "No, sir. You just saw someone being treated badly, and you didn't think twice." "I didn't think at all, really," Marissa admitted, a small, tired laugh escaping her despite everything. "I just couldn't stand there and watch it happen." Elias nodded slowly, then turned back to Taylor, whose hands were trembling now against the edge of the register. "What's your name?" "T. Taylor, sir." Her voice barely made it out of her throat. "Taylor," he said it evenly, without theater, without raising his voice the way she might have expected, might almost have preferred, because at least shouting would have felt like something she understood. Instead, his tone was quiet, measured, worse somehow for its calm. "You looked at an elderly woman who forgot her card and decided she didn't deserve patience, decided her worth was tied to what was in her wallet at that exact moment. Did it occur to you, even once, to simply ask her to step aside so you could help the next customer while she sorted it out? Did it occur to you that kindness costs you nothing, but its absence can cost someone everything?" Taylor's eyes filled, humiliation and shame tangled together so tightly she couldn't separate them. "No, sir, I didn't think. People come in here all the time trying to—" She stopped herself, hearing how hollow the excuse sounded, even before she finished it. "My mother," Elias said, "raised me in a 2-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. We counted change for bus fare. We stretched a single chicken across 4 meals. She has never once forgotten where she came from, which is exactly why she still shops in stores like this one, dressed exactly like this, refusing every convenience my office could offer her." He glanced at Agnes with something between exasperation and enormous love. "She could buy this entire store, Taylor. She could buy the block it's sitting on, and she chooses every single week to stand in line like everyone else because she believes no one is above the ordinary business of being human." He let that settle before continuing. "You didn't know that. You couldn't have. That's not the point. The point is, you didn't need to know who she was to know how to treat her. You looked at a woman who seemed to have less than you, and you decided that gave you the right to be cruel. That's the part I need you to sit with. Not because she's my mother, because she's a person." "They all are." He gestured, briefly, toward the small, silent crowd still frozen around them, several of whom suddenly discovered urgent business on their phones. Taylor nodded, tears slipping freely now, not bothering to wipe them away. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, ma'am." She looked at Agnes directly, for the first time since the convoy arrived. "I was wrong. About all of it. I don't have an excuse." Agnes studied her for a long moment, the same patient, searching look she'd given 1,000 people over a long life, and then, unexpectedly, her expression softened. "Everybody's capable of being unkind when they're tired, or scared, or think no one important is watching. The test isn't whether you slip, it's whether you learn something when you do. She reached out and touched Taylor's hand briefly, the same small gesture of grace she'd offered Marissa less than an hour earlier. "Learn something today." "I will," Taylor whispered. "I promise, I will." Elias turned back to Marissa, and this time there was warmth in his face that hadn't been there for Taylor, an entirely different kind of attention. "You're a single mother?" "Yes, sir. One daughter, Nora. She's 6. What do you do for work?" "I was a receptionist," Marissa said, "at a dental office, until they downsized in the spring. I've been picking up shifts wherever I can since." She said it plainly, without self-pity, the way people say things they've made their peace with, because falling apart isn't a luxury available to them. Elias glanced at Foster, exchanged a brief, wordless look, and then turned back to Marissa with the faint, deliberate beginning of a smile. "I have an opening in my office. My current secretary is retiring at the end of the month, and frankly, I've been dreading the search. I need someone organized, composed under pressure, and apparently unafraid to spend their last dollar doing the right thing without expecting anything back." He held her gaze steadily. "That's rarer than you'd think, in Washington or anywhere else." Marissa's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Sir, I have no experience in—" "You have exactly the experience that matters," Elias said. "The rest can be taught. Foster will get your information today. Full salary, full benefits, starting whenever you're ready." He paused, glancing meaningfully toward the shelves where her groceries had been returned. "And someone will make sure you and your daughter have everything you need in the meantime. Consider today's shopping the easiest decision anyone's made for you all year." Marissa pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, unable to hold back the tears now, not from grief this time, but from the sheer, dizzying relief of a door opening where she'd expected only more walls. Agnes watched it all with quiet satisfaction, the particular pride of a woman who had spent a lifetime believing that kindness, given freely enough, tended to circle back around to those who least expected it and most deserved it. In the weeks that followed, the story spread the way stories like it always do, first through the store itself, then through the neighborhood, then, inevitably, through the wider world, though never with Elias's blessing or encouragement. He hadn't done it for headlines. He'd done it because his mother had raised him to believe that character revealed itself most clearly in the small, unwitnessed moments, and that afternoon in Corner Fresh Grocery had revealed 2 very different characters at once. Taylor stayed on at the store. She asked to. Something in her had shifted permanently that day, and she wanted to prove it, not to Agnes, not to Elias, but to herself. She was, in the months that followed, unrecognizable to the customers who remembered her before, patient with confused elderly shoppers, generous with young mothers counting coins at the register, quick to offer grace to anyone whose card declined or whose total came up short. She never spoke of that day unless asked, and when she was, she answered honestly. "I learned the hard way that you never know who you're standing in front of, and even if you did, it shouldn't have mattered in the first place." Marissa took the position 3 weeks later, after Nora's school let out for the season, and within a year, she had become indispensable in Elias's office. Sharp, unshakable, fiercely loyal, the kind of person who remembered every name and every detail because she understood, better than most, what it meant to feel invisible. Nora grew up visiting her mother's office on school holidays, drawing crayon pictures that ended up taped, without exception, to the refrigerator in their new apartment. the one with a kitchen big enough for both of them to cook in together. And Agnes Whitfield kept shopping at Corner Fresh Grocery every single week, exactly as she always had, in her gray cardigan, with her canvas tote and her folded list, unhurried and unnoticed, because that, more than any title or convoy or headline, was who she had always chosen to be. The lesson, when people told the story afterward, was never really about the president, or the convoy, or the soldiers outside the sliding glass doors. It was smaller than that, and larger too. You never know who is standing in front of you. Treat them as though they matter, because they always, always do.